wasting any more time. Stefanos, let me put this to you. You've been the leader of the party since, I think, September, so about 8 months or so. And if one were to describe the period between then and now gently, euphemistically, one would say it's been eventful. But if one was to put it...
6.5 months.
Okay, 6.5 months.
And one would say eventful, but highly productive.
Okay, but if one was being a bit more blunt, one might say it's been full of divisions and disputes and disarray, and above all, with no measurable impact on the party's standing in opinion polls relative to the New Democracy government. There's still a big gap, and it does look as if the European Parliament election in June will confirm the gap between the two parties.
So let's tackle that for a second. You're talking about divisions. Divisions within Syriza had existed for a very long time. However, there were never deep ideological divisions at their core. We never had a predecessor like Mr. Mitsotakis has with Mr. Samaras, who spews homophobic and racist rhetoric in different forms in parliament. And then the propaganda machine of Mr. Mitsotakis just covers it up. I am proud that our divisions within Syriza were totally minor compared to that. And perhaps they were a bit more tactical in terms of the party's history, but rest assured that there's only one big progressive party in Greece right now, and that is Syriza. We have renewed ourselves. We have a big movement that is visible outside. You can ask many people here, you can ask many people anywhere I go in the country. I would say, clear lies of the current government vis-a-vis the Tempe train crash, vis-a-vis the surveillance scandal, vis-a-vis taxes, the fact that they promised to reduce taxes before the election and they've done exactly the opposite, vis-a-vis this economic miracle that everybody sees right now was essentially marketing. This is all coming to the fore now, and my responsibility is for the renewed Syriza to put forth a new governance team as well as program. That's exactly what we're doing. And in terms of the opinion polls, they have a lag. They're a snapshot with a lag. I have no doubt that our gap, even in those polls, with New Democracy is going to close very quickly within the next month. And I'm highly confident that we can shock Europe and the country in the next election.
Okay, thank you. If one looks at the period roughly a decade ago when Syriza as a party made its breakthrough on the political scene, I mean, initially in 2012 and then by winning the January 2015 election, it seems fairly uncontroversial to say that that breakthrough happened because of the situation of extreme crisis that the country was in, the economy was in, and the severe discredit into which the mainstream political establishment had fallen. Now, those conditions don't apply now. There's much more economic stability, the sense of a political establishment that simply couldn't speak credibly to the public. That doesn't feel the same now. So how can Syriza restore the heyday years of electoral glory that it had in that brief moment of crisis?
The economic stability that you refer to is a very narrow, albeit important, fiscal economic stability regarding the debt to GDP ratio. And that is, of course, a positive for our country. But if you look at the rest of the indicators, particularly regarding convergence with the rest of the European Union, the track record has been despicable. Between 2019 and 2023, Greece has ranked 21st in the European Union in terms of real growth. We are last in terms of private investment as part of GDP. We are second to last when it comes to purchasing power above Bulgaria. And we're second from the top in terms of highest indirect taxes, VAT, below Sweden. So we pay like Sweden, we buy like Bulgaria, and there's no private investment. And even the most recent statistics showed that year on year, private investment, FDI, foreign direct investment, is down 40%. And within that down 40%, it's higher when it comes to tourism and Airbnb real estate, and it's lower when it comes to industry, electricity, financial institutions, etc. This is not an extroverted economy. And so we have a huge amount of work to do, and rest assured that when there is a global recession, this economy is not prepared for it, structurally. Not to mention the issues with the rule of law. You know, in terms of what brings growth and real growth, I generally look to Leonard Horowitz's theory, you know, the Nobel Prize winner in economics from 2007, talks about incentive structure for the social state, for a nation state. And there's two parameters that are very, very important. One is that the rule of law prevails. The second is that there are open markets that are regulated. On the first one, we have the worst track record in Europe in terms of our justice system, in terms of commercial cases coming to resolution. And you see huge issues with the efficacy of the justice system in Greece. Let me remind you that Prime Minister Mitsotakis has been Prime Minister for 5 years. 5 years means something when it comes to not reforming the justice sector, particularly when you present yourself as a business-friendly leader in one of those two key components. The second, in terms of the open markets with regulation, even in the energy sector, they haven't done anything there. There's literally, in my view, a farcical energy market when it comes to power pricing. Not even the filters that are in place to control the pricing dynamics. We have the most profitable electricity companies in Europe. We are literally letting a handful, like 2 companies, build in the name of green transition, which of course we espouse, but in a fair way that doesn't alienate society. It's not carried out without the consent of local communities. And we're going to have a country that is going to see its nature change dramatically to enrich 2 families. People are struggling right now to pay their electricity bill. And not to comment on the banks, that somehow this country, the first de facto bankrupt Western country in the world, still the highest in Europe when it comes to the GDP ratio, has some of the most profitable banks in Europe. They were the most profitable in Europe when it comes to banks. And the government disinvested over the past 4 months to show you how, frankly, clueless they are about financial management. They disinvested from the banking sector equity worth 3 billion euro, which has a yield of 15%. And if it's a rising market and a growing economy, and why are you disinvesting with that type of yield? They've disinvested from 7 companies during this period in the banking sector and outside it. And since they've done that, in the past couple of months, their market value has gone up 500 million euro. So I think they have a very dogged ideology. They are not solving the real social issues, and they're very good at marketing, and thankfully we're very good at marketing now too.
You've spoken in the past of your support for the notion that there's a role for a well-regulated market economy to improve the performance of Greece's economy. But does that mean then that you would say, under your leadership, Syriza positions itself closer to mainstream centre-left parties like, for example, the Spanish Socialist Party or the German Social Democrats, or is it closer to the more radical left parties like Podemos in Spain or Mélenchon's France Insoumise in France?
I think this is a question of labels. And when people wake up in the morning and they're thinking about how to pay their bills, they don't eat labels. You don't eat the center left, you don't eat the radical left for breakfast. What you eat is what the country allows you to eat by succeeding by succeeding in an equitable environment. If this country were a properly functioning Western modern economy, we wouldn't have the most expensive housing in Europe. 3/4 of the youth here, youth up to almost my age, 35 years old, still lives in the childhood bedroom. That is completely unacceptable. So what exactly are we supposed to do in a small country compared to Germany, for example, when our capital city is bigger than Berlin? Are we not supposed to invest in housing and decentralize in the country? Is just a regulation on golden visas and Airbnb going to do the job? The answer is no. The answer is that we need radical solutions to fix big problems. If we are a properly functioning country that allows for the weakest of our society to have a welfare state, to give them a fighting chance, that allows for a real middle class to survive and prosper, and to have social mobility across the spectrum, then maybe we should be just center-left. But that's not enough in this case. We need to have radical solutions when it comes to housing, when it comes to climate change. And I have no issue saying that Syriza is center-left. We are covering that full space. But that's not enough when it comes to the biggest issues of our time.
Of course, it is important for any government in Greece, in the light of events over the last 10 to 15 years, to maintain the confidence of international investors. And are you...
It is very important. Let me remind you that during the New Democracy PASOK governments of 2009 to 2014, we had 2 memoranda of austerity that left €0 in the public coffers. And in 4.5 years, Syriza left €37 billion in the public coffers. That is for historians and political scientists to opine on. And I'll tell you something you say about this flip-flop, essentially, the Kolotuba. Let me remind you that Syriza was elected to try to renegotiate what the German austerity was mandating on the country. The previous 2 governments, and frankly, what their incompetence as preceding governments caused on the country with the massive debt load. Let me remind you that people were literally at the brink of hunger and suicide. They needed an exit. They gave Alexis the mandate to go and renegotiate. And he tried, and he brought forth at the end, albeit with changes in the process, not only the cash cushion that even Standard & Poor's says today that it's very large for an economy of this size, which Mitsotakis has not grown, by the way. It's the same cash cushion, despite the economy growing. He also managed to have the best debt relief package probably in the history of Western economies. Our current debt relief plan, in terms of the hedging of the interest rates and its amortization schedule, is how Greece is now able to survive a pandemic and various geopolitical crises. So let's call a spade. For better or for worse, Syriza responded to a situation that other governments had caused. We managed to leave the country in very good shape for the successor. And I think now it's time for everybody to see that we have renewed ourselves and we're building the big, progressive, center-left, aggressive left, if you want to call it that, interventionist left party that the country needs.
Okay, let's turn to international affairs. We have just enough time, I think, to spend a bit of time on this. Do you believe?
One parenthesis. I'm sorry to interrupt you. And when it comes to foreign investors, rest assured I can communicate with them better than my competition.
Okay. Well, I'm sure they
Coming
will.
From that
I'm sure
space,
they'll hold you to that.
I'm sorry. What?
I'm sure they will make sure that you stick to that line. But so on international affairs, I mean, do you?
I'm the only political leader who's actually succeeded in the private sector in years. This includes Mr. Prime.
Does that not include Donald Trump?
I'm the only political leader in Greece who has actually succeeded in the private sector.
Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't include. Who knows? Is it time for a ceasefire in Ukraine?
Donald Trump and I have antithetical views on almost every issue. I can tell you one that we agree on, which is China policy and holding China accountable for the distortions that it sometimes engages in vis-a-vis trade. But unlike Donald Trump, I don't turn a blind eye on China's violation of human rights, right? And so Donald Trump is very, very selective on what he wants to change that is mainstream.
Are you in line with his idea that it's time to bring the war in Ukraine to a rapid halt, or do you believe it would be wrong to leave the areas that are currently under Russian control still in Russian control?
I think the Western world needs to provide all the aid that Ukraine needs to stand for itself against an oppressionist bully. To that extent and to that goal, to that purpose, Greece has a role to play. I've been very vocal that I do not wish for our military equipment to be sent to Ukraine. Any humanitarian aid, access via our ports and our geopolitical position is something that we can offer, but it is up to other countries in a more favorable position, both financially and geopolitically, to provide the military aid that Ukraine needs. I do not think we should ever allow an oppressor to be appeased, ever.
Okay. Does that mean that under your leadership, Greece would play a constructive role in the effort to boost the common European defense, for example?
Absolutely. We need to transition from a transatlantic dependency, even though NATO is critical in the fight between Western democracies and three regimes, let's say, that all of us know who they are, from east of us. I would say that NATO needs to be a defensive alliance, as it is. And we need our primary focus to be a European independent military capacity. So Greece absolutely should pursue that path.
Okay. Well, we're moving towards the end here, so let's come back to the start of the conversation. Now, you expressed confidence that the polls would change and you'd get a better result than now looks likely in the European Parliament elections.
I really hope you're going to be asking me poll questions when we're tied with New Democracy.
Well, I'll happily come back and do that.
Then you're going to be like, who's going to win?
But let's say that rosy course of events doesn't happen, and the clock moves towards September, the first anniversary of your leadership. I mean, are you in Greek politics for the long term, or would you say, well, you know, it was interesting, but enough is enough?
You can stop there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I'm in Greek politics for the long term.
Right. So even after the election that's now scheduled,
politics for the long term.
Beyond what's now scheduled as the election in 2027.
Of course.
Okay, well, in that case, there's plenty more time for interviews like this to take place. A round of applause for Mr. Kasselakis. Thank you.